Good morning, everyone, and welcome to day 9 of Curiosity Brisbane. My name is Benjamin Law, and my official title here is Master of Curious Conversations, which I know sounds like a sexual identity. It is not yet, but I'm very, very pleased to be here with you all here on the lands of the Turrbal and Yagara people. I've flown over here from the lands of the Gadigal, part of the Great Eora Nation, and as we all know, First Nations people on this continent have been making art, discovering science, sharing knowledge here for tens of thousands of years. Together they constitute the oldest continuing human civilization the planet has ever seen, and I'm particularly grateful to elders past and present that we can continue making art, discovering things, sharing knowledge here on what is and what will always be Aboriginal land. Now, how many of you have gone under the wheel of Brisbane in the last few days and seen an amazing giant guitar underneath? How many of you have seen that already? I mean, for those of you who haven't, part of me obviously wants you to stay here, but part of me almost just wants you to tell you to just go there right now because it's really, really cool. You'll do that afterwards. We're going to talk about it first, because what it is the world's largest playable acoustic guitar. It's the Immersive guitar. It's something that you can literally throw your entire body, hopefully in a non-violent way, but you can place your entire body inside the instrument and play it with other people, and it functions like an actual guitar. So, of course, if you actually go on the wheel of Brisbane, or if you happen to be lucky enough to work at the ABC, you'll be able to look down from above and you'll actually see this instrument is an actual guitar. When you see it and when you play it, I think several things will strike you. One, that it's an enormous collaboration between different disciplines to bring such a thing to life, but I imagine it will also bring up questions as well. One of which I have is, what happens when an engineer and guitarist and instrumentalists walk into a bar? What happens next? I think we've got some answers here today, and I'd love to hear them with our guests. Our first guest is a percussive artist dedicated to exploring how sound shapes our lives, with the hope that attentive listening will lead to attentive custodianship of our surrounds and our place. Her key projects include the Piano Mill, Sounding the Condamine, which examined the history of the Condamine Bell in outback Queensland, Water Pushes Sand, which examined intersections between Szechuan opera and improvisational practices with Australian Art Orchestra, and Sonic Dreams. Can you please join me in welcoming Professor Vanessa Tomlinson, everyone?
Thanks, Benjamin.
Welcome. Our next guest is a senior lecturer at the Griffith University School of Engineering and Built Environments, who has engineering degrees from Malaysia, Iran, and a PhD right here from UQ, is that right? He provides expert services to industry around modelling, manufacturing, analysis and certification of design, and is involved in myriad design and construction of residential and industrial works. Could you please join me in welcoming Dr. Hassan Karampur, everyone?
Thank you, Benjamin.
And last but not least, our last guest is a classical guitarist who has performed extensively internationally. Her performances have been widely broadcast on radio and TV, and her discography of over 20 albums, is that right, has gained her many industry accolades, including 2 ARIA Awards, which are very dangerous. I've seen them. Like, you could murder people with those things. Her collaborative work spans many disciplines, including music, theatre, dance and film, and she also happens to be the head of guitar at the Queensland Conservatorium of Music. Please welcome Karen Sharp, everyone.
Thanks, Benjamin.
Thank you. Okay, I want to know the answer to my question. What happens when musicians, instrumentalists, guitarists, and an engineer walk into a bar? Give us the origin story of this remarkable construction, this piece that we've got sitting underneath the wheel of Brisbane, the world's biggest acoustic guitar, the Immersive guitar. What were those first conversations like?
Well, the first conversations, to be honest, happened in my head. And I was by myself playing the guitar, as I am, for many hours, many years of my life. And this is kind of a recurring daydream, really, just imagining what it would be like to be inside the guitar. I mean, you have all kinds of crazy thoughts when you're playing for a long time, and it can be a time of actually quite a cathartic time. You sort of think through a lot of things from the day and all your feelings and whatever, but you also kind of, you know, occasionally go into these sort of slightly creative fantasies. And one of them, which was consistent and recurring, was shrinking myself down and going into this fantastical world inside a guitar, kind of Alice in Wonderland style. And that's really where it began. And I sat on that for quite a while and hadn't really talked about it with anyone. And I was at an amazing event at the Queensland Conservatorium in which Vanessa had created an incredible work whereby she had turned the con theatre into a musical instrument. And somehow this gave me the courage to say, Vanessa, should we build a big guitar?
Can I just take a step back there? I want to ask you, Vanessa, how do you turn a whole space into a musical instrument? What's going on there?
So this was on the stage of the Conservatorium Theatre, which is a massive stage. And if you've never been on a stage in a theatre, what you see from the front is only about a quarter of the size of the actual stage. So the fly towers where you're putting sets up in and out, lighting is going in and out, is just enormous. So we had the audience on stage. We had marimbas and xylophones all the way up to about 25 metres above you. So when you go to the conservatorium, you'll see this extra big section above the theatre. That's where they all were, including about 20 triangle players in the lighting fly tower way above. So they just became like a constellation of stars at the top, and then fabric unfurling onto the stage and all the ropes sounding. So the whole thing became like alive. Alive with sound, and that was my fantasy coming to life, meeting Karen's fantasy, I guess.
Yeah, and then when you start having this conversation, why don't we take that idea, turn it into a string instrument that we're familiar with, but blow it up? What do you do next with that? I mean, it's one thing to have an idea, it's another thing to execute it. You'd executed something else prior, but a guitar is something different, right?
Yeah, look, I was talking about this the other night, and the weird thing about artists is that once we have ideas and we have momentum, we almost immediately have a destination. And the destination is the actualization. And it's just this arc that we're flying on. We don't know where it's going to land. We don't know when it's going to land. But once you've taken off, it's really hard to go backwards without a sense of disappointment. And neither Karen and I are very disappointment-oriented folk. We're quite optimistic. So we'd launched it literally at that launch. We had launched this idea, and then it was a matter of collating a team that could actually do this, because if Karen and I were building a large guitar by ourselves, it'd be made out of rubber bands and Lego, and that's a bad combination.
So I imagine when it comes to a team, I can imagine a lot of people who might be involved, but I imagine one kind of discipline that you really need is engineering. Is this where you come in?
That's true. And my side of the story is a bit funny. I was sitting in my office one day, opened up the email. There is an email from Karen's shop, and it says, I want to make a huge guitar. Do you want to do that? And I thought
that's the entire email, isn't it?
No, it was more than that. I guess there was some explanation why we want to do it. And so that name rings a bell. But she's not a client. And I thought, and she was on my iTunes. I've been listening to her music the day before. And I think I didn't hesitate. I just wanted to do it. It was challenging, but I knew it would be a lot of fun. So I just replied, yes, I'm in.
That's so serendipitous. Did you know that story, that he was listening to your work prior? Had you put it in his iTunes, just in case?
I just thought it was incredibly serendipitous because I just, and this is, I guess, the wonderful thing of being in a university, which for me has come only quite recently in my career. I joined Griffith University only 5 years ago. So I've been a freelancer and, creating crazy things for a long time before that. But the great thing of being in a university is that you can get onto the internal staff page and Google, structural engineer, and there's a colleague. That's actually how I found Hassan. And I got really excited because in his bio it actually said that he's a specialist in structural timbers. And from very early on we knew we wanted it to be made, obviously, of timber the way a classical guitar is. So that I felt was very serendipitous also, that we had this incredible expert at Griffith University that I could just send an email to.
And so, Hassan, when you're presented with this wonderful, perhaps mad proposal, arguably, what did you foresee was going to be easy about the task, and what did you foresee was going to be challenging?
So the way it works, always an engineer works with an architect. I need to name Mr. Bruce Wolf from Conrad Gauguet. So the design is his idea, actually. He had this wonderful idea that it's best if the guitar is floating. So if you go and look, you see there's a skirt, and then the guitar is on top of that. So after that is when the engineers start putting a structure to that architectural design. I knew it was challenging, but I haven't thought through all the steps at the beginning. I just said yes. And then we realized it's still a building, so it has to comply with all the standards of a building, because the idea was to have at least 20 people inside. And now I think you can easily get a dozen people in there. So that's where the other company came in. There are building certifiers, Philip Shun, and I need to name Mrs. Kat Patterson from there. And then all these discussions started that what do we need to do? What is the actual heart of this has to be? And then came the idea of having different types of materials in it. And so everything about it was new, because you open textbooks, you don't see any building looks like a guitar. So even the wind calculations is not there. So you have to come up with something new that works.
That's incredible. And coming from a guitar background yourself, knowing so intimately how the instrument works, what were the rules and parameters that you set? Like, how did you need it to be exactly like a guitar, and what could you kind of maybe play around with?
So I think for us, the most important thing was that it would be entirely acoustic. Mm-hmm. There have been upsized guitars previously, and we have a wonderful researcher, Jocelyn Wolfe, who did a lot of background research in the initial phases and found that, yes, indeed, there had been other attempts to upscale guitars, but all of them had ended up using electronics in order to make the sound. And we had very stubbornly decided that we would not be using electronics and it would be entirely acoustic. So in order to achieve that, we needed, obviously, an instrument maker who also happened to share my fantasy. So Jim Redgate is one of Australia's great luthiers. I've played his guitars for many years, but he's also an amazing innovator, and he loves a challenge. So I rang him, also somewhat shyly, and said, we're thinking of building a giant guitar that you can walk inside. And his reaction was, oh, fantastic. I've always wanted to be inside a guitar, which I thought was interesting because he builds them, so he kind of is inside them anyway. But so he really came up with the concept of how this could work, how this could make sound, and you know, that it would work as a functioning musical instrument. And that obviously is very important. This wasn't just about making a kind of a big pineapple style upsized guitar, which my husband keeps mentioning to me, by the way.
We are in Queensland.
We are in Queensland. The big pineapple, the big prawn, and so on. My husband's got a whole list. But obviously we wanted this to be a functioning musical instrument. And in doing so, I guess, you know, we were creating, in a way, a new musical instrument. It's a guitar, but it also is other things. It's a room that you can play. It makes a lot of different sounds, and you can do things on it that you can't do on a guitar.
Karen, I love that you've been finding people along the way who have shared this strange idea, dream of yours. It's almost like you've found other people who've got a secret kink or something in a very different way, Professor Vanessa, I want to ask you, you come from a percussion background, right? So what appealed to you specifically about a guitar on this scale?
The guitar has always also been a percussion instrument. Is anyone a guitarist here, by the way? We have one. So when you play the body of a guitar, the whole thing is a resonating box, and it's much like a cajon, which comes from Central America.
It's like the thing
and
that you hit
it's
like
basically
that, right?
it used to be an orange box, so you'd play it on the wharfs and just amuse yourself while you're waiting for the next load of stuff to come in to unload. And then it's sort of been professionalised and made into a box made out of slightly higher quality woods. But much like a guitar, it has all these different sounds in it. It sounds really beautiful. It's a very essential percussion instrument. So I was really excited about all the percussive qualities of this particular building. And I was excited about all the different woods that we could use in this. Hassan got us onto the Department of Agriculture and Fisheries, who are doing a lot of research into sustainably harvested woods from Queensland. So we've been really interested in how we can use these different sounding woods. So you'll see the top part of the guitar is made of hoop pine, and it's really beautiful, just an incredibly amazing finish, 4mm ply, if I'm not mistaken. And then we've also got some cedar and blackwood in there as well. So they're all really beautiful woods, beautiful sounding woods. So that was a huge part for me. We haven't totally exploited that part of it, so we have some platforms in there, and I would love to keep developing the platforms to become more and more experimental in their percussive natures, because it matches so well with the guitar sounds that we've got. And you can hit the strings. So it's so upsized now that there's actually space between each string. So you can use a stick on the strings and it makes a really great sound. We've got these beautiful new disco beats that we're developing on all the strings, which I really love. You can now bow it, which, I mean, the thing about percussion you have to understand, we take that as an excuse to do whatever the hell we want to do. It's like a hat that you can put on that says, you know, I've got a free pass to whatever. And we use that very liberally. So, you know, we're happy to bow things, we're happy to pluck things, we're happy to hit things.
Wow.
So that exploration, I think for me, the new instrument exploration has been the thing that's just opened my mind. And being able to go on that adventure with a musician like Karen Sharp is just a dream come true.
And to clarify, when you say bow things, you mean like bow as you would a cello or a double bass, to play it like that?
Yeah, correct. So the tuning of the guitar is in the range of a double bass. So the lower notes, when you're bowing them with a double bass bow, just sound absolutely fantastic. You can get harmonics on them just like a string instrument. So it operates like a meta string instrument. It's somewhere between a gujang, a koto, a sitar, a guitar, a harp, a violin, a cello, a double bass. So it's like it represents string in a way.
Now, I don't know who to ask this question to, Hassan or Karen, but, you know, back in the day when I played high school clarinet or any instrument, you knew that you could go to whatever, like your local Allen's music shop and pick up your reeds, you could pick up guitar strings, you can pick up whatever. This instrument hasn't existed before. So where do you get the supplies that you need to not only create, but also maintain this instrument?
Well, I can talk about the strings, and then Hassan can maybe talk about our weights and pulleys system. So Jim Redgate actually, because he was building the kind of the sound making innards of the guitar, he went to Bunnings and found a whippersnipper cord is available in many different colours, but also representing different thicknesses. So he experimented with that, and he said it actually had really lovely acoustic qualities. It's made of nylon. He did find that it stretched quite a lot, and that if you took the tension off and put the tension back on, it would fail. So he was finding a few issues with it. So eventually we moved to fishing line, very, very thick fishing line. Wow. This is not fishing line that you use, you know, when you're fishing in the river. This is fishing line you use when you're game fishing. So I think our lowest string is 700-pound marlin line.
Wow.
So it's super thick. We have kept one whippersnipper string, which is actually the second lowest string, and we couldn't find fishing line in that thickness, and it does make a beautiful sound. And being thicker, it's more stable than the thinner ones were. So we've got one yellow string. And yeah, we became, quite good friends with the people at Tackle World at Southport.
But what I'm hearing is that it involved trial and error, and to make something for the first time involves lots of experimentation.
Absolutely. And then, of course, we had to find a system of pulleys and weights, which Hassan can talk about.
Pardon the boring physics. If you remember from high school, those figures with pulleys and strings and minimizing friction and the stuff, we had to actually implement it because it works still, is science. So I think Jim did very accurate calculations to find the frequencies that he wanted. So frequency of the string depends on its mass, stiffness, its diameter and length, of course. So each of those strings had to go on pulleys, which had minimal frictions. And then we had to get those pulleys, and it's not something you can get from store just going. So I had to just walk around. I'm from the Gold Coast, and then going to these different manufacturers, bearing shops and stuff, and asking them that I'm looking for a particular size dimension of a pulley that has almost zero friction. And then, of course, they're asking me, what are you building? And I tell them, if I tell you if it's a giant guitar, what would you? And we're looking at me like, what? So we finally managed to get what we wanted. So there are two sets of pulleys. And then at the end, these strings are attached to some steel wires with some fence tensioners like ratchet systems. And then on the other end of it, you see these steel blocks, which are, again, very accurately manufactured. Each one is about 30-something kilos, if I remember correctly. And that's what maintains the tension in each of these strings. So we make sure it stays in tune. Yeah.
Wow, I love that you have to keep telling people, this is what this is really for. From where we have the guitar now to the inception of the idea, Vanessa, how long has that process been?
Yeah, good question. It's been about 2 years in the making. And that's 2 years in a COVID lifestyle. So we were hoping to get this up and running probably mid last year. But the interesting thing about a project like this is that we got to the 3D model stage fairly quickly, probably within about 6 months. We'd done all the experimentation to get to a point where we knew basically what we were aiming for. But it actually takes a partner who's willing to say, I will back this project for the world premiere. And it's really, really important to try and find a partner who is, sympathetic to the process and can see value in it, but can't actually see what it is yet. So it's still our idea in our heads and a 3D model. So huge thanks to Curiosity, because they actually said, yep, we're willing to back you and we're willing to see this project through. And it was really, really important for us that we had a Queensland launch for this project. We're from Griffith University and from Conrad Gargett Architecture. It's made of Queensland woods. We wanted its signature to stay here because it will probably travel around the country, potentially around the world in different situations. And that was important. So for Curiosity to come on board and give us the tick was awesome. But unfortunately, the tick came in November and Christmas came and we all teach full-time at universities and teaching started and semi-trailers were arriving and cranes were arriving and we're trying to finish building. So it was quite a crunch time of that, while I say 2 years, I think I heard Hassan say 3 weeks the other day.
That's true. The whole construction happened over 3 weeks. We had to do it. I think there were times where we had at least 8 people in our workshop working from 6 a.m. till 5 p.m., which was preparation of shop drawings. So we had shop drawings ready, and then the following morning we were CNC cutting, water jet cutting, grouting, all of these to assemble and weld and drill 8 a.m.
Wow.
So this is how it happened, yeah.
So a 2-year process, which strikes me as quite a fast process, really. Maybe it doesn't feel that way, but 2 years to think of this and to actually make it into a reality. We heard some of the interesting experiments that were invested into making the immersive guitar along the way. We talked about trial and error. What were the other kind of interesting errors or surprises that happened along the way?
Well, something we had to resolve early on was how big is a big guitar? And we actually, one of our first meetings, we actually had those long pieces of silk that Vanessa had used in the Con Theatre at the launch. We had those, and we were all in a room at the Con, and we had big mic stands. And we were putting the silk, so we were basically kind of making a fabric and mic stand guitar to see what it would feel like to be inside it and what is the right size, what are we going for here? So that was an initial kind of thing to have to resolve. And then, of course, thinking about the fact that it was going to be outdoors.
Yep.
So having a sound hole is a great idea, but not if it rains. So we ended up...
And it has been raining lately.
It's been raining just a little bit.
So what is the solution there?
Well, a Perspex kind of lid, which we can open. So it's become like a sunroof, our sound hole sunroof. So, I mean, you know, there's just an endless number of things that we hadn't thought of and had thought of and hadn't resolved.
I was just thinking of one of the early conversations was to try and climb in through the sound hole. That was my big dream. I'd climb down a ladder and then find yourself inside a guitar.
Like a submarine.
Oh, it'd be so good. But related to that is that whether the strings are on the inside or the outside. And obviously in outdoor weather, having the strings on the outside would be less appealing. So that was a huge modification that we had to make to this guitar, is to have the strings actually visible on the inside of the guitar. So it's a real operating classical acoustic guitar, but the strings are above your head inside the guitar. They're not 11 and a half times longer. The guitar is at 11 and a half times bigger. But, of course, if they're 11 and a half times longer, only our sort of subterranean worms would hear them, or whales in the ocean, because the vibrations would just be so slow that our ears could not pick those up. So trying to find the frequency range for a big guitar that gave you the sense of bigness without it being so low that we couldn't enjoy it is actually an interesting conundrum.
Any other engineering surprises along the way?
A lot of surprises, definitely. One thing I knew from very beginning was the tie-down system, because we knew we were not allowed to drill holes or cast the concrete foundation here next to the wheel. So the idea was to have all these concrete blocks all around, connected with cables to the frame, just to tie it down. And also the other thing was to make it heavy enough such that the uplift under the wind is not a lot. So, believe it or not, this structure is designed to take wind load of 30 meters per second. If anybody can tell me what is that in kilometers per hour? Almost 100 kilometers per hour. And this is reduced, like these buildings that you see around here, they're all designed to take 200 kilometers per hour wind events, but this is a temporary structure. So these were structural challenges. Also, the choice of materials. We had to combine different types of materials in form of a sandwich panel, just to make sure it's stable, strong, and also serviceable. In this case, serviceability was maintain the deflection so low such that the structure still stays in tune. This is something I think no other engineer has to deal with before.
So we heard earlier, Karan, your story of almost daydreaming about climbing in a guitar, and wouldn't that be cool? But I almost want to ask all of you a deeper philosophical question, which is, coming from your background, why was it important to make this? Why make this at all? What drove you over the last 2 years to make sure that this would become a reality?
Well, for me, excuse me, I think actually watching the joy on people's faces when they themselves play, and of course including many children. I mean, we've all spent many hours in there now showing people through and talking to people about it. And, you know, when someone says, "Oh, I'm not musical," and then they get up and they can play and make this really quite big, resonant, beautiful, rich sound, and just watching their eyes light up. For me, that answers the question of why, actually. And also the understanding of, you know, that when engineering and architecture and instrument design and music come together, there's the potential to make something new and great that gives a lot of people joy and also makes us think about the importance of collaboration.
I love that idea of access as well, because you might not be a musician per such, or you may not think of yourself in that way, but here is this kind of public space that everyone can access and have a go with. That's terrific, bringing music into people's lives in such a beautiful, open way. Hassan, what about you? Why was it important for you to see this project through?
Honestly, I was curious to see what it looks like when it's finished and also what it sounds like. I talked to one of our tech officers when we accepted to be part of this, and he asked me, Hassan, why are we doing this? And I told him we've done a lot of work together, but I'm pretty sure 10 years from now we look back, we think this is one of the highest achievements we've ever done, the biggest thing, most enjoying thing I think we've done. I was just wanted to see what it looks like.
It was curiosity that drove you.
Certainly, it was, yeah.
What about you, Vanessa? What motivated you over the past 2 years?
Oh, look, I love unlocking imagination and proposing things in public spaces that help us think about the world differently, imagine the world differently. In this case, think about design, sound, acoustics, all of those things. I personally get huge value in stimulation from ideas. And if I can contribute some stimulation, if I can contribute some complexity to this world, that to me is a good thing. And the more complexity we can all stimulate in each other, the greater this place is to live. So art is really, really important to me. And making links with science, sharing language. So the other part of it for me is professional development, how I can stay as a lifelong learner and how I can keep my practice moving forward. And I do that by reaching out to different people, by saying yes to different projects. To be honest, it was not my life's dream to build a big guitar.
It comes out now.
That was not, like 2 years ago, I was not going, I can't wait for Karen to ask me to build a big guitar with her. I might have been thinking, oh, it'd be great to do a gig together. But it unlocks new ways of thinking and doing. And the journey of life for me is all about that.
Now, you mentioned, wow, it could be cool for us to do a gig together. As I understand it, and let me know if I'm wrong, but as Curiosity Brisbane continues, a composition is actually being formed within and for that guitar. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. So my role is, it turns out, is as composer, but I feel like I've done a lot of other things on the way to get here. And as the composer, we did a preview the other night of 5 kind of short movements of sounds that we've explored and collected actually from the public. So when people are coming in and doing interesting things, I chat to them about that interesting thing and go, that's a cool technique, thanks. Could I use that in a composition? Yesterday, someone got out their go-card and their driver's license as 2 picks and were playing these really awesome grooves. And then I got up on stage with them and was doing some pitch changing with a bottle. And we were both very satisfied at the end of that. So Karen doesn't know this yet, but that's going into the composition. So it's just this way of collecting from experience of hearing people play it. New instrument, new music.
That's really good product placement for Queensland Government State Transport System as well. So if you've got your go card, make sure that you bring those things together. And so when you're putting together that composition, when will that be debuted? Will it be debuted as part of the festival? Will we all get to hear it?
Yeah, so it's actually going to be the closing of the festival next Sunday night at 7:30. Unfortunately, only 13 people are allowed inside the guitar, and for that reason, it's going to be live streamed. So rain, hail or shine, we will be premiering this incredible new work. And yeah, really looking forward to it. And I think all the people that have visited along the way have seen maybe some element of that being created along the way. So hopefully people will come on that journey with us.
Rain, hail or shine, whether the sunroof is open or closed, it will happen. What do you see is next for the immersive guitar? Because this is its debut, this is its world premiere, and as you said before, you could foresee it maybe going around the country, maybe going beyond. How do you want it to be engaged with, and where do you see it being used?
Well, look, we would love this to be a part of festivals, possibly in galleries, the way that it has been here, for people to be able to engage with us, with it, for us to be able to continue to create work. Jim Redgate's been calling me every few days from Adelaide with new ideas of how he can modify what he's done to add a fretboard and to add this and to add that. So, I think it will continue to evolve as an instrument, and hopefully we'll be able to share it with as many people as possible, who will also in turn, contribute to it and play it and figure out new ways of using it with, credit cards, whatever.
And the other part is that it is a venue. So we want to have the meta idea of a solo guitarist playing inside the immersive guitar. So doing a solo recital in there. A festival like Tamworth Country Music Festival, having unplugged artists in there doing single songs, travelling to chamber music festivals. I mean, there's all sorts of applications. And I think what we've done is launched the idea, and now the imagination of others can start to contribute to its future.
A guitar within a guitar, like a giant guitar turducken that we can look forward to. Hassan, a lot of people are going to engage with the work and play with it, have really good time, immersed in the immersive guitar. But I want to give everyone who made the time to come here this morning like a bit of a treat. Like, what are some really cool things that they can only know by talking to you about the guitar? Like trivia, how much of what was invested into it, any kind of like stats and figures that you're really excited and taken by? What can you tell them?
Well, that's a surprise. I have to be careful what I say. I mean, you really want to know numbers, or in terms of...
Sure, give us something. Look, it's not just size that matters. We've established that. But maybe some of the measurement, let us know.
Yeah.
What are the kind of cool stats and figures?
So this giant guitar weighs slightly under 3 tons. So if you know what is the car weigh, small car is like a ton and a half. So this is like 2 cars. The other thing I said, it can take standing winds of 100 kilometers per hour. The amount of work we put in it, I think it's... altogether, combined labor hours, it's close to 4,000 hours of work. Dollar-wise budget, I wouldn't say that.
Modest.
A lot of the work that went through it was by people who were really dedicated, devoted, committed. They really wanted to see how it goes, it finishes. Like normally in engineering, everybody's thinking when they start the day, when they finish the day. In this project, everybody was just keen to do it to the best perfection that we could have done. A lot of the students also participated in the design and manufacturing of this. So all came out as a big group project, and was quite interesting for me to see artists, musicians, architects, fitters, welders, concreters, engineers, everybody just working together towards building something that nobody has done before. So that was the whole interest for me, yeah.
Wow.
That was a trivia, honestly. There wasn't anything hidden or secret.
And how many cranes did it take to build a guitar?
The other thing I should have mentioned is this is all modular. So we knew that we wanted to travel around Australia, maybe even overseas. So it's altogether 18 modules, 12 in the wall and skirt and 6 in the roof. But all the modules will be craned. Like some of them we could crane it into like a small skate type trolley, but the others needed to be craned with a 20-ton Franner, which we had here. What was the question again, apart from the... so we had it one day on a semi-trailer, 12 meters long, and we brought it just there next to the wheel, and it was craned into the place. It all happened in one day. There's a time lapse of it on the internet. I don't know if it's available to everybody. It's quite interesting if you want to see. Yeah.
But this really is a marriage of so many diverse disciplines, isn't it, Vanessa?
When I said about professional development, I'm not joking. Like, I'm in there talking about weights and pressure and load and stuff, and I'm not a physicist at all, and have had to sort of go deep into my brain to rekindle some of my high school science. But it's actually, I think, when you have a project that's driven by passion, all of these disciplines come into it naturally, and the language naturally comes into the way we have to explain it to other people. So for all of us, we've had this huge disciplinary expansion. Yeah, that's all I need to say on that.
I mean, we've heard a little bit about, people's reactions, how they've been using the structure so far. What do you all want people thinking about, meditating on as they're using the immersive guitar? What do you want to be going through their minds as they play this instrument?
Sound is cool. And to listen differently.
Yeah.
I mean, just sitting here listening to those birds going crazy behind us, it's beautiful. I mean, there's just so many sounds in the world. And, when you can pay attention to sound, we pay attention to our environment in a different way. And I think it's, just hearing the inner city bypass over there, it's just this constant hum mixed in with the birds. Like, every place has a sonic signature, including the inside of a guitar has a sonic signature. And I think that's a beautiful thing.
I mean, when I introduced you right up at the start, one of your kind of mission statements, your MOs, is that you hope that attentive listening will lead to attentive custodianship. In the context of the guitar, how do you see that playing out?
Well, inside the guitar, like I said, it's all made of locally sustainably harvested woods. Just starting to be aware of materials, where materials come from, the travel miles on all your materials. So there's that kind of awareness. But also, I guess, appreciating what one has in sound rather than what one does not have. So while we can go and buy a $200,000 instrument that's made of problematic rainforest woods, we can also produce something like this locally. And so just trying to reimagine what we value is what I would say in answer to that.
Thank you.
And I would add actually also that, people can be free to have a sense of whimsy and fantasy and dreaming with all of that. It's not all deadly serious, and, it can, out of fun can come something that makes us think. And I think that's a really important aspect of it as well.
Yeah. I'm going to throw it open to the audience really, really soon, but any other favourite reactions or any other favourite ways that you've seen people play the guitar so far? Because it really is open to interpretation, isn't it?
I love asking people, particularly kids, when they walk in, what do you think it's going to sound like? And a lot of kids say, oh, really high. And then their mouth just opens when you pluck a really low string and it goes woof, and they just kind of, wow. So I love that reaction. It's just wonderful.
Wonderful.
I often ask if it's their first time inside a guitar. And it's weird because we've been inside a guitar all day, every day for the last week and a half, and it feels really normal. Is that scary?
I love that. So if any single people here are going to use the guitar, that's a really good pickup line, I think. A really good pickup line. It's your first time inside a guitar. That's great. Hassan, have you seen many interesting reactions yet?
I think one of the best was my five-year-old son. I mean, he's those, probably just jumps on top of, fidgets all the time. So I told him we're going to see a guitar, and he was quite happy. And when you were performing, Vanessa and Karen, he was looking up for almost 60 seconds, didn't move, which is totally unlikely of him. So,
so he was mesmerised.
Yeah, he was quite surprised by the whole sound and the looks of it, yeah.
I love that. Thank you so much. I'm going to throw it open to all of you now. It is Curiosity Brisbane, and we expect you to be curious in a respectful way, of course, but curious about all the things that we're learning today. Do you have any questions for our guests today? Yes, question there. I'll repeat the question. Thank you so much. So it's a site-specific work. It's located under the wheel of Brisbane. As we know, Curiosity Brisbane spans, 4 precincts on either side of the river. But this piece is there underneath the wheel. Was there something about it? There's accessibility issues, but are there other issues around why you wanted the guitar there specifically?
We did not, in our original application, ask for a specific site. We were hoping it would be somewhere in the precinct of the conservatorium for relational ideas, but also for ease for us. But it was actually the genius of the executive producer, Teresa, who came up with the idea of coupling that with the wheel, partly so you can view it from different angles. It's also fantastic access for our cranes and semi-trailers to get in to help us build right there. And beautiful views from QPAC. If you go up into the Playhouse and look back across, or from the ABC, there's this beautiful moment where ABC morning presenters suddenly realised on air, talking to Benjamin, that there was a guitar being built outside their window, and they just went screaming to the window on air, "Oh my God, there's a giant guitar!"
Yeah.
It's the best live radio I've heard in ages. And then, I don't know if you know this, Benjamin, right after that, they came running down and into the guitar, and I was there, and they were just breathless. "Oh my gosh, what's happening? How does this work?"
I did encourage them straight after that. It's like, you should do an outside broadcast just completely in the guitar, so hopefully that's coming up as well. Thank you so much for your question. Any other questions from the audience at all? A question here.
So I was at Noir AR last weekend, and collaborations again. So where do we take these collaborations next?
So your question is, you've been engaging with Maiwa AR, which is the AR augmented reality experience where you scan QR codes at various sites throughout Curiosity Brisbane. And from that point, you'll be able to see through your web browser 360 degrees what your surrounds looked like before colonisation. So when we talk about the lands of the Yagara and Turrbal, what Yagara and Turrbal land looked like before white arrival, which is quite remarkable. A huge collaboration with a lot of disciplines, art historians, elders, custodians as well. This is also a huge collaborative process to make the immersive guitar. Where do we want to see that collaboration continue?
I don't know if we're going ahead with more joints instruments. Just give me a heads up. I can check the standards and codes and see what is doable.
Yeah, next stop, the giant tuba.
We have been taking requests. There's been a giant timpani, so you can just sit in the belly of the timpani, or bass drum, giant triangle, so you can slide inside the triangle. That didn't get past the building certifiers.
I wonder what the boss level instrument is. Like, you've done guitar, but what would be the most challenging and slightly impossible instrument? The euphonium, maybe.
Yeah, I reckon the trombone would be pretty fun.
Yep.
We're actually really happy to have met each other and to have become a team. And it's as much about friendship as about collegiality. Just finding new people to work with. So I have no doubt we'll be relying on each other for projects into the future. Also, we represent the arts at Griffith University and also the sciences. And we had a function the other day, and everyone was really taken by just how connected the arts and science are in this project, and how it's a pilot project for many other things that can happen. Interdisciplinarity is strangely hard, as you probably know. It sounds great in principle, but we're so specialised that to action interdisciplinarity takes a lot of extra effort. Yep.
I mean, Hassan, what's your take on this? Because one of the conversations that we want to have around Curiosity is transferring the conversation around STEM, science, technology, engineering, maths, to STEAM, and having the A as arts as incorporated into part of that, because arts aren't often thought of as right in the middle of the science and technology kind of conversation. Do you think that's a legitimate and important shift to start thinking about with arts at the centre of those conversations?
I think this certainly is. This was one of the ideas I had from the very beginning to be part of this, is actually the role of engineer as a community engager, like sustainable, healthy society, working with people to build things or engage in the ways that are sustainable. So I think that A in STEM creates the link with sciences and also other disciplines there. The other thing I wanted to say, probably I missed, is we are advocates as engineers, researchers, to use more and more sustainable material in construction. So we're getting away from concrete. We're building more timber buildings. A good example is 25 King Street, where our Nashore grounds are. So 9 stories all of timber. The other thing we're promoting is actually to use local timber, not European or American. So these are the things we want to do, but it's always requires some drive from the community to support what engineers do, because it's not only financially driven, it should be other things behind it as well. So why not art? Definitely.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you to all three of you for making that STEAM conversation come to life in such a vivid and playful way. Any more questions from the audience at all? Yes, one here. Where will the giant guitar modules live after this? It's between gigs, so it breaks into different modules, but it's not exactly an IKEA flat pack, is it?
It is very close. You won't believe it. Most of the parts fit in actually a furniture removalist truck when we brought it here. So it can't fit in a shipping container, go anywhere.
Sorry, you'll have to have... Yeah, to look after the timber, do you need air conditioning and other sorts of things, insulation?
Depending on the duration, certainly you want to have some, because timber, especially that thin 4.5 mil plywood, needs some durability considerations, treatments and stuff. Yeah.
If by chance you have a large garage, we can talk after.
I mean, Karen, you must be so familiar with what goes into maintaining the upkeep of a guitar. What kind of upkeep are you anticipating with this?
Oh, look, it's been actually kind of an interesting process for me, because initially I was, of all of us, by far the most kind of fearful, because everything anyone did was, oh, don't do that, that's a guitar, don't do that. And then I'm like, no, you can do that, because it's much bigger and it's tougher, and So for me, it's been an interesting kind of learning curve of actually letting go and saying, yes, it is a guitar, but there are things about it that are also very different and not as fragile as a guitar. So, but certainly it's been really interesting to observe, for instance, that the strings, even though they're super thick and much longer and much more durable than on a standard guitar, they actually respond in the same way. So in rainy weather, the strings sound different. When the sun is coming through the sound hole, the strings go slightly flat, as they do on a normal guitar. If you get warmth on a normal guitar, the strings go flat. So that's been really interesting to observe. And of course, asking people to be careful, but also allowing people to enjoy it and engage with it, because there are things that you can't do. You can't hang off a string and expect that it will survive. Something fairly bad is likely to happen. So that's been really interesting for me to kind of observe the differences, but also the similarity, and identify with it as an instrument. And, my personal guitar is like my baby. Even if someone else plays it, it's like, oh... treasure it, be careful, So that's been an interesting process of letting go, and Vanessa's reminded me many times to chill out.
And quick question.
You did well.
Quick question, how do you tune it?
Well, it actually is tuned by the use of weight. So a normal guitar is tensioned, and a normal classical guitar has about 8 kilos of tension per string. This, because it's upsized, the strings require about 35 to 40 kilos of tension, and the way that we've done that, which was Jim Redgate's concept, is to actually use actual weights. So the strings run over 2 pulleys, frictionless pulleys, which are surprisingly difficult to come by, as Hassan told you. And then they actually hang off weights. And the tuning, apart from the sort of temperature and humidity considerations, is actually very stable. So we've actually not needed to retune it. We did have little extra fishing weights and things that we can add or subtract, but we've not really needed to do that.
Oh, that's so fascinating. So kind of a gymnasium component as well. A question right at the back. Have you thought about using metal strings on the guitar yet?
Yeah, so that's something that I said to Jim initially. I said, look, it's so hard to get nylon this thick. Why don't we just use wire? And he said it will completely change the sound. It changes the concept, it changes the sound. I think he possibly did even try in his initial, because he kind of built a frame at home and tried things out in his workshop, and he said they won't work. They need to be nylon strings.
Any other questions? Yes, one here and another one there, yes. Have you had anyone from the deaf and or hearing impaired community interact with the space?
Yeah, actually, when it was first being advertised and we were first thinking about it, we had the idea that the audience could sit with their backs against the wall of the guitar and feel the vibrations of the guitar. And that's actually where the name, the Immersive Guitar, first came from. Because of some building certification issues, it rose a little bit higher, and that became less part of it. But probably about a week before it opened, I got a message from someone about that exact thing, wanting to bring a whole lot of people through. And some people have come through, and it's been really fascinating to get them up there to feel it. The strings vibrate about, 3 centimetres? So you can really feel that movement happening. There's been quite a few visually impaired people that have gone up and played it and really enjoyed, actually taught me a lot about how the sound is working in the space, because they explain the sound working in quite a different way to how I perceive that. So that's definitely something that the public have brought to us.
Thank you so much for your question. There was a question here as well.
Yeah, I mean, you've just touched on it a little bit, but I'm curious as to whether playing the instrument has challenged or changed how you think about music in any way.
Has playing the instrument changed or challenged the way you think about music in any way?
I think Vanessa and I have had quite different experiences with that. For me, as a guitarist, it was initially quite challenging not to have a fretboard and not to be able to make music by controlling pitch in a really free way. So I started madly trying to find all the harmonics that I could find and learned to use a bottle slide so that I could change pitch. But over the time, and it's only been 9 days, so it's not really a long time, I discovered that, I've become more and more open to all the other sounds that it can make, and I've really enjoyed that, and I've learnt a lot about, in a way, becoming a little bit of a sort of a learner percussionist from Vanessa showing me, things that she wants me to do in her piece. So that's been really interesting.
I've definitely loved bowing on the 2 low strings simultaneously, which are a tone apart. So it creates this really dense frequency range. And I want to lie on the floor while someone does that for me for about an hour, and I'd be really happy. But that hasn't happened yet. So
any volunteers from here today? See Vanessa after this conversation.
You need amazing upper body strength, can I just say? I've done a little, like, I need a rest, Vanessa. And she's like, you're clearly not a percussionist.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much. And thank you all for coming out here today for this curious conversation. We'd like to thank the Queensland Government through Tourism and Events Queensland, the Brisbane City Council through the Brisbane Economic Development Agency for their support of Curiosity Brisbane. Thanks also to Curiosity Brisbane's major partner, the Courier Mail, and media partner 9 Queensland, as well as Curious Conversations partner NBN Co, who are providing support for us to live stream these mornings globally right around the world. Thank you also to our precinct partners, Brisbane City Council, Southbank Parklands, Arts Queensland, State Library of Queensland and Queensland Museum. And could you join me finally in thanking our 3 wonderful guests today, Vanessa Tomlinson, Hassan Karampur, and Karen Sharp, everyone. Thank you so much.